I'm Will Aubrey. I'm here with Joe Darnell. It's time for the Racer Sports Report. And of course, we're highlighting primarily Racer basketball, even though it's the summer, because after all, we're Racer fans and you can't beat Racer basketball.
Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm only going to talk about the things that people have talked about with me recently. We're not creating this content. We're just bottling up some content that's already going around. So, yeah, people really want to know about the Racer Sports. I don't know that they want our opinion of it, but you know what? That's fine. They clicked. So, you brought it upon yourselves.
Now, the Racer basketball team has been in the Bahamas for the last few days playing
guys.
down there, and they won all three games down there. The only game that was remotely close was the first game, and they won that 89 to 85. The other two games were total blowouts.
Yep. And really, looking at the box scores, I'm not shocked by anything. All the stuff we saw was, it just kind of catalyzed all the things that we've been talking about from the end of last season, looking at the beginning of this season. To me, there's two big questions. Who's point guard? Who's a defensive stopper? You lost John Morant and Shaq Buchanan, arguably the best point guard to ever play at Murray State. I said it's arguable. Man, was he good. And then you lost Shaq Buchanan, one of the best defensive players in Murray State history. I mean, truly, I believe that. So the question is, how do you replace those guys? How do you do it? And I don't know that we got a good answer from this summer trip. Not that it was bad. I think anytime you get an extra 10 days of practice, a chance to go overseas and work together and kind of bond as a team and build that chemistry and camaraderie, I think that's extremely valuable. But nothing I learned on this trip is earth-shattering. Tevin Brown can score. I'm not surprised by that. He's an incredible shooter. Is anybody shocked by that news? I mean, really, the guy can just light it up. He's one of the best shooters I've ever seen, especially he's going into his sophomore year. Now, he's a redshirt sophomore. He's a sophomore. This is the kind of guy who's gonna get paid one day to play basketball. That's not a surprise. What did you see? What do you think are the big questions coming into this summer about Murray State basketball? Have I got it right, or am I way off in the weeds?
Well, I think the biggest question has been who's going to be starting point guard. That's the biggest question. And then for me, who's going to start at the three? Because that's where Shaq Buchanan played.
Yeah.
Now, it's not clear how the other positions will shake out either. You could assume that Darnell Cowart will be starting at center. You could argue that KJ Williams has to start. Then you have Anthony Smith coming back. We'll have to see how that all sorts itself out.
Right.
I would bet this. I would bet all three of those guys play. But the primary question, the first question that has to be answered is who's your starting point guard?
Yeah, because after the opening tip, if Murray State grabs the ball, if it's a forward, who does he pass the ball to? This is the first decision made in Racer basketball will be who do you pass the ball to? And take the ball up the court.
And I don't have any eligibility left, and I wouldn't pass the ball anyway.
I was going to say you're more of a shoot first, ask questions later kind of a guy.
There you go. There you go.
But a good shooter, 28 to 50%, depending on the day. No, I think that's the biggest issue. I mean, you've got a bit of a logjam in the forwards. I truly believe that Darnell Cowart, this is a guy who really played very well in the second half of last season. I mean, he had an okay first half of last season, especially for a guy coming in from JUCO. The transition from junior college at the fastest takes a semester.
Well, let's get to Cowart here in a minute. Let's talk about the point guards. How do you think they looked in the Bahamas, and who stood out to you?
You know, honestly, from a point guard standpoint, I think right now it's Noah Kamba and Chico Carter.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a 1A, 1B on that. Chico Carter has shown the ability to score. He did have a really good last game. He had double-digit assist numbers. But Noah Kamba to me is a pure point guard. Chico Carter is a combo guard. That's not It's not a knock on either one of those guys. It's just trying to give you the idea of the mentality they come as true freshmen onto campus with.
I like Kemba. I like
too.
his ability to break down defenses.
Me too.
His quickness.
Great passer. He is a great passer. For
Yes.
his age, he is a phenomenal passer. Now,
He's a little guy,
yeah, he's
and that
not huge.
that could be a liability on the defensive end.
Yeah, it really could. And honestly, I look at what he can do. I like having a pure point guard. There's something about that that's great. Now, that being said, we're coming off of 2 years with Ja Morant, where at least last year, you could look at him and say he's the best point guard in college basketball, and you'd be right. But this is a guy who scored 25 points a game. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was a pass only point guard.
Right.
I mean, fantastic scorer who, oh, by the way, also averaged double-digit assists and made jaw-dropping plays every 4 or 5 minutes. I mean, the step down is going to be drastic, and I think it's going to be important.
Do you go with Kemba as your starting point guard, or you go with Carter? Or is there any chance Daquan Smith works his way in there?
You know what? I think it really is. I think it really is a toss-up with those three guys. I think the rest of the summer is going to tell you an awful lot. I'll put it to you this way. I don't believe that the coaching staff has picked their starter yet. Daquan Smith, I didn't know what to expect, honestly. He's not, another one of those guys, he's not overly big. You know what I mean? The only one of those three guys who has some pretty good size to him is Chico Carter. But Daquan Smith's quick. Noah Kemba's quick. Those things are valuable. I mean, it's what you want out of a guard. You want to have a guard that can break somebody down. The thing that I loved about Daquan Smith's game, from what I've seen in videos from this Bahamas tour, I love his mid-range jump shot. I know he can get to the rim and create layups. I know he's good at that. He's got a good mid-range jumper. The thing that I haven't seen yet is I haven't seen the prolific passer in Daquan Smith. The way that I've seen Kemba be a pass-first guy and make some good passes, or even Carter goes through and make passes and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be between those three guys. My first instinct is that it's probably going to come down to Carter or Kemba, but there's an awful lot of time between now and first game. I mean, there's an awful lot. I think it might be after the super secret scrimmage before we know who's going to start that first game.
Now, I believe 3 guys started each game in the Bahamas.
I think that's right, yeah.
Tevin Brown,
Yep.
KJ Williams, and Anthony Smith.
Yeah.
So it would seem to be safe to say that those 3 have an inside track toward starting when the season begins. Now, Anthony Smith, though, it's a situation where you have to ask yourself, where does he play?
Yeah.
Because he could play the 4, he could play the 3. He played the 5 some in the past.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see. Plus, Darnell Court was not available to play in the Bahamas.
Right.
He played all last year with a knee injury. He had surgery, and he supposedly is well recovered from that surgery. He has great spring now. His lateral movement is terrific. They just didn't want to take any chances with him in the Bahamas, and you can't blame them.
Bit. No, I mean, you're looking at a guy in Darnell Court. The guy that we saw in conference play last season, if we got nothing more, nothing less than that guy, you're talking about an all-conference first team kind of a guy. Because honestly, it's one of those where a lot of that is graduated off, and I really believe that Darnell Covert's going to be one of those guys that gets the ball a lot in our offense. The thing that is really intriguing to me is if he improves. If he improves and is better, healthier, has more spring, has a little bit more elevation, you're talking about a guy who could be a dominant player, a Terry Taylor numbers kind of guy. When you think about what the team can do, that's going to be a major part of that is having an interior presence that can score. Now we know KJ. We know what KJ is. He's developed very well. He's still young.
Can all three of those guys play at the same time?
Boy, I don't know.
I mean, in this day and age, you want your three to be somebody who can shoot 3-pointers.
Absolutely.
I don't
Which is
know.
why Tevin Brown or Shaq Buchanan last season was so incredibly valuable.
I don't know that any of those three can shoot from the perimeter well enough to play the three.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think KJ's worked on it. He's developed a little bit more of an outside game. He's still not what you would call a guy that you want to spot out there and have him shoot.
So I'm thinking maybe Court eventually winds up being the starter at center, and then KJ Williams starts at the 4, and Anthony Smith comes off the bench and plays big minutes off the bench. That's what I'm thinking.
You know what? I don't know how it's going to work. I will say this. We shouldn't get caught up in who starts and who doesn't start. It should be about the minutes distributed to each guy. I think Darnell Cowart's going to be the anchor in the post. He's the guy that you've got to keep on the floor. From a scoring standpoint, Anthony Smith is one of those guys. He's not, you look at him and you're going to go, man, he's too small. He can't do it. And then you just watch him play, and he's a tenacious kind of a player. He's a bulldog down low. And there's a place for a guy like that. Then you got KJ Williams and Devin Gilmore. Now, Devin Gilmore, again, one of those guys you're going to look at and go, I don't know if he's big enough. I don't know if he's. You're talking about a guy who did really well towards the end of the year last year. Actually stole some minutes going into the
And unlike most years, when you look at the Racers' interior players, it's not a situation where you're saying to yourself, do we have anybody who can play?
Right.
It's a situation where you're saying, how are we going to have enough minutes for everybody?
Right. Well, and we haven't even talked about Damon Robinson. Now, Damon Robinson, freshman, he's 6'9", 260, first team All-State out of Alabama, and might be one of those guys that could develop into the conversation of, holy crap, this guy's one of the best bigs we've ever had. He has that kind of potential. I mean, you look at KJ. KJ's at 6'10" now. He's a 6'10" post player. You're looking at, this is not a problem that has happened very often for Racer fans. We've almost got too many post players.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. Now there have been teams, and I'm not going to name years or names, but there have been teams as a Racer fan where you're like, all right, how many guards can we put on the floor before it really starts hurting us? We've had that kind of depth on the perimeter for years and years and years. We've actually got a ton of forwards, which is why I'd even ask the question, can Anthony Smith or can KJ line up at 3? Is that possible? Is that something they could do? At this point, it's all speculative because we're still very much outside on this one, but it's a question that I think has to be asked.
I think Tevin Brown's the starter at the 2. I don't think there's any question about that.
I think Tevin Brown starts wherever you want to put him.
And, he shot the ball extremely well down in the Bahamas,
God.
Despite the fact that they moved the 3-point line back a foot. He still hit 50% of his 3-pointers, shot the ball extremely well, and Tevin is set up to have a first-team All-OVC kind of year.
Absolutely agree. I honestly believe you could move the 3-point line back in 3-foot increments, and I don't know how long it would take before it noticeably impacts his ability to knock down the outside shot. That's how good of a shooter he is. I mean, it's one of those where it's not like me getting out there and you're like, okay, can he draw iron? This is a guy, he elevates well. His all the stuff that you want from a 3-point shooter is there. He's got a good tight stack. He releases the ball high. He has explosion with his legs, and it's a repeatable motion over and over and over again. It's that repetition that makes good 3-point shooting. And if you watch him, every shot that he takes looks the exact same. The release is the same. You know, you're talking about a guy that is just, he is a good shooter. He's got all of that in there. I think he actually had a poor year shooting for him last season. I truly believe that.
And he shot it well.
And he shot it really well. I mean, as a redshirt freshman, I think he shot 37% from three. That doesn't happen very often. I know that we're looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, well, you know, he was a starter. Starters got to shoot 30% or more. 33 is the minimum. But holy cow.
Now, here's why Anthony Smith might wind up playing the three.
Okay.
I'm not sure who you turn to at the three if you don't put him there. I mean, Holiday is coming in as a junior college transfer. He would seem statistically to be a fit for that position, but he didn't really show much down in the Bahamas. I guess you could play Chico Carter at the three, but it would make you a little small. And in addition to that, he's a freshman. And, you know, I know that freshmen can come in and be extremely good, but I'm not sure that you want to go that way.
Yeah, and so for me, the reason why I've even thought about Smith at the three is because of the two questions, it's the only chance you have of answering one of them at the three. If you put Tevin Brown at the two, we know how good of a defender Tevin Brown is. I wonder if they don't pull the reins back on him just a little bit on the defensive side. You can't have him picking up fouls overplaying on defense. You can't have him be exhausted at the end of the game. You need his scoring ability. He's going to be the leading scorer for this team. You've got to have him make it to the end of the game. You can't have him sit out, you know, most of the first half with 2 early fouls. And we know how inconsistent the whistles can be in college basketball. So being aggressive as a defender is not something you want your best player to do.
Moving along,
yeah,
I think you've got some recruiting information.
Yeah, we've it's always nice to have recruiting information this time of year. Racers picked up what may turn out to be one of the steals of the recruiting year, getting an early pledge from Deontay Blanche, a 6'3" point guard from Tarpon Springs, Florida. Had offers from Missouri State and Louisiana Tech and was getting sniffs by some bigger schools. Had a really good summer this summer playing the AAU circuit. Kind of came out of nowhere. Doesn't play in the big shoe circuit, so didn't get quite the exposure that a lot of guys get. But holy cow, you want to talk about a guy who he can put up some points.
What kind of player is he?
Explosive.
No, I mean position.
Oh, they've got him listed as a point guard. I see him more as a combo guard because he scores just
How
so
big
much.
is he?
6'3".
6'3".
So he fits.
Right.
I mean, you're looking at a guy who fits the mold for a Murray State guard. You know, had games in high school where he scored, 37 points, 40 points in some AAU games. I mean, one of those guys that you look at and you go, holy cow, what are we getting? And I think you were seeing some recruiting upticks for it. To get him early is really valuable. We talked about the post depth that the Racers have this year. I think there's still going to be post depth, even though you lose 2 guys. Next year you lose, Court and Smith. You've still got some post depth to work with Williams and Gilmore and Damon Robinson and Matt Smith. You'll have some ability for some depth. What you really need to do is fill in more guard play. You want to be able to pack that perimeter. And I think, honestly, Blanche is the kind of guy who could play the 3 if you wanted him to. He could play the 2 if you wanted him to. Now, I don't know. He's a good ball handler. He's a good defender. He's kind of an all-around good player. It's what you want to see out of a guy, but a good pickup at this point. I've not seen a ton of video on him. I'm going to try to see if I can't see any more, but interesting if nothing else. Also, Murray State released its basketball schedule, Will.
That's right.
Aren't you excited? It's not like the end of September. We have a basketball schedule.
That's true.
It's a whole thing. It's not like bits and pieces and rumor and innuendo. This is a real schedule, and there's some good games on it. So it was funny to me to hear the responses from some Racer fans about the schedule because they were kind of ho-hum about it. Oh, yeah, it's fine. Let's kind of give a breakdown of what we're looking at. All right.
Okay.
There's 2 non-D1s. That's a negative. There's a SWAC team. That's a negative. To me, in my opinion, you don't really want those. But you've got an A10 team on a neutral floor. You've got SIU and Missouri State and Evansville from the Missouri Valley.
Okay.
You got Middle Tennessee from Conference USA. And then in the Gulf Coast Showcase, you've got Wright State or Weber State. Then you've got Northeastern, South Alabama, Drake, or Miami of Ohio. Honestly, I don't think there is a bad way through the Gulf Coast Showcase where you have teams that negatively impact your RPI or your net rating at the end of the year. I love the Gulf Coast Showcase. First game against LaSalle, it's exactly what you want. That's a team that the worst A10 team, which they weren't, the worst A10 team last season still had a net in the 200s. Now, LaSalle's going to be probably a middle of the road towards the bottom A10 team next year. You're going to get a team that you're going to have a top 150 win. If you can beat LaSalle, that's a good game. On a neutral court, that's a good game. You take that all day. You just got to.
How do you feel about the Tennessee game?
Playing at Tennessee. All right. So this is
I love that game.
I think it might be one of the best scheduling pieces I've ever seen for Murray State. And here's my reasoning behind it. You're talking about a Tennessee team that lost a ton of guys. They've got a good coach. They've got good pieces. They've got a guy in Eve Pons who's one of the better players coming back. He's going to be tough to guard. That's a winnable game against an SEC team. If you can schedule winnable games against SEC teams, you do it every year.
Absolutely.
If they say, hey, we want to play it on the moon, you say, okay, well, but you're paying for our travel. I mean, honestly, there's nothing wrong with winnable SEC games because if you win it, you're talking about a team that's going to have a top 100 net rating, and you're going to have a road top 100 game that you have a chance to win.
I think it's a great schedule. Moving on, though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Racer football.
Yeah.
And I do not like that schedule one bit.
Ugh.
There are 4 meaningless games. 4 games that won't be games.
Yeah, and I know which ones you're talking about. You play Pikeville at home.
It won't be a game.
Then you go to Georgia and play Between the Hedges.
It won't be a game.
Then you go to Toledo and play Toledo.
It won't be a game.
Then you play Morehead State.
And that won't be a game. You'll win 2, you'll lose 2, and none of those 4 games will be competitive.
And I'm here to tell you the only thing that scares me is having those 2, the Georgia game and Toledo game back to back. I always worry about injuries.
I know.
Injuries. The difference between a good team and a great team is keeping your starters on the field longer and being able to keep them in there and go for it.
Now, the Massey ratings, for the first time in recent memory, predict a 6-6 record, a 500 record for the Racers. That means 4-4 in the OVC.
Honestly, it would be tough. I could see the Racers being 7-3 going into the game at SEMO. That's I don't think that's a huge stretch. Now, would it be tough? Yeah, it'd be tough. Winning is always difficult, but
Here's the negative. If you look at the preseason All OVC teams,
yeah,
the Racers have 3 guys.
Yep.
That makes you feel pretty good until you realize that they're all specialists.
Yep.
When your best players are your kickers,
no, I'm with you. So the thing that
when you don't have any regular players who are preseason all conference picks, that's scary.
So the thing that gives me hope,
Okay.
in FCS football, you have to have FBS transfers. You just got to have them.
Yes,
I mean, that's the best teams have them, the worst teams don't.
that's true.
And I mean by transfers, not just guys who come to your school, but guys who make an impact, a positive impact
Right.
on the program.
Absolutely.
The guys that Murray State has gotten are really impressive to me. Led by Daquan Green, a 4-star wide receiver out of Florida who transferred and is going to be the wide receiver. I assume he's going to be a starting wide receiver.
I would
Murray
assume
State.
so.
It is difficult to measure the impact of an elite athlete at a position that you have to have talent. I mean, let's look. Jonathan Moss is a heck of a wide receiver. I'm not worried about our receiving core generally. I'm not worried about, but I'm looking for guys who are that one step up, who can do something that nobody else on the team can do. I mean, we got a D tackle from West Virginia, a guy from Memphis, a guy from Troy, a wide receiver from Marshall. We've got some JUCO guys who've come in to help bolster the running back core. The question then comes to Preston Rice.
There you go.
Is Preston Rice good enough to not have a major drop back from a guy who's taking snaps in the NFL preseason? You know, that when we talk about Drew Anderson, we can talk about how good he was last year. He's with the Arizona Cardinals. I saw him throw passes in NFL preseason. I watched it. I mean, he's that good of a quarterback. He's that good of a quarterback that he's at least getting that cup of coffee in the NFL. And then you're bringing a guy in who's a redshirt sophomore in Preston Rice. I don't know.
I can tell you this. They really like him.
Yeah.
They've liked him from the beginning. He's very athletic. Now, what that means as far as how he's going to make decisions and how effective he's going to be as a quarterback, I don't know. I would tend to be skeptical just because he's going to be doing it as the starter for the first time.
Yeah. No, I think the best case scenario has Preston Rice looking like another former Racer quarterback who came from a small town, and that's Stuart Childress. You want to talk about a guy that when he committed to Murray State, I was like, okay, well, he's a good Western Kentucky football player. I don't know that he'll do anything at Murray State. What he did was come in after an all-OVC quarterback and rewrite the record books. You know, you're talking about a guy who, Preston Rice, he's got the arm strength. He's got the footwork.
Well, and one thing that I remember Stuart Childress doing, and credit Coach Joe Panunzio for this, because I thought it was such a cool play. They would get deep in the other team's territory down to about the 3-yard line up with an empty set. And then Childress would just take off and run it in.
Yeah, something that looks straight up like, oh, it's got to be a pass play.
Yeah.
And then run out of it.
It spreads the other team out.
Right.
And if you've got a quarterback who can run, you can be very effective doing that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, now I won't say that Preston Rice is definitely going to be Stuart Childress. I'm not going to say that. I think there is an analog for him in Murray State history. And I think he's got the tools to be successful. I'll put it to you like this. The wide receivers that he's got are good. If the O-line can hold up and he can do some things and they can run the ball a little bit, I think there's a chance.
I think you've got a quick bit of information about the Callaway County Lakers.
Yeah, Luke Schwepker was named the number 10 player in the region by WPSD, or the coaches in the region were surveyed by WPSD, and they called him a number 10 player in the region, which, kudos to Luke Schwepker. That's a big deal. I mean,
Luke is a big-time athlete.
Really
he has
is.
great speed.
Yep.
Funny story. Chris Champion, who's the head coach at Callaway County, I was talking to him last year, and his wife texts him during football games when he's coaching. And
No, he doesn't have his phone out on the sideline. Let's just
I'm-
start with
I'm not going to address that. I'm not going to address that. But he told me that she'll text him, give the ball to Luke more.
You know what? She's on to something. I'm just saying, she's on to something. That's a pretty good one. Well, that's all I got, Will. What are the things have you got thinking about this offseason?
I think that wraps it up.
All right. Well, that's a good one. We'll have to come back and as soon as we get a little closer, maybe we'll find out who the point guard's going to be.
All right, that brings to a close this edition of the Racer Sports Report.